Shocking data, lose twice as much weight with this tip for Zepbound weight loss and other GLP-1 medications. Hi, beautiful friends. I'm Elizabeth, Countess of Shopping. I have had the privilege of being on GLP-1 medication the last almost 2 years. I've lost a whopping I almost said 200 pounds. That's not true. A whopping over 100 pounds. This is my before and after. And on today's episode, I wasn't supposed to film today's video. Today was supposed to be the holiday guide thing. This article just came up. The Count sent it to me from The Atlantic. It's called Ozempic Killed Diet and Exercise by Daniel Egbert. I'll link it down in the description link below. Just click the ... more button and you can see all my links that I'm going to be talking about on today's episode. But when I say I was shocked and stunned, literally I had to remind myself to close my mouth. As I was reading this article, I'm like, this is so counterintuitive to everything we talk about for GLP-1 medication and for my friends on type 2 diabetes, Mounjaro and Ozempic, and my friends with chronic obesity management for the obesity management component, Zepbound and Wegovy, and if you're on Tirzepatide or semaglutide compounds. This is crazy data in a new study that I think is just scratching the surface. And so let's dive into it basically. So what this article is talking about, which was clocking with me as I was reading through the paragraphs of it, it's talking about people talking about diet and exercise and move more, eat less, and like that 1990s philosophy of which I have had some accounting with my own obesity healing with food and my relationship with food of yes, for me to lose weight, I am going to have to be in a calorie deficit. And for me also not to have the muscle mass problems that come with GLP-1 weight loss, substantial weight loss in general for anything, not just GLP-1s, but in general, we lose muscle mass loss. And that can affect our bones and a bunch of issues I don't want. I don't want that. That can exit to the left, to the left, to the left. And so in this Atlantic article, it was talking about going through about how David Saxon, an obesity specialist at the University of Colorado, Anschutz medical campus, and I'm butchering that, but basically said, he said, I'm going to answer this carefully. I don't want you to quote me saying he doesn't think lifestyle is important. For older anti-obesity drugs, he said the evidence is favor in prescribing diet and exercise first. And it's very clear. In clinical trials, people who received lifestyle intervention in addition to drugs lost twice as much weight as people who didn't. So with that same philosophy now with the new GLP-1 medications, Tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro and Zepbound, and semaglutide, which is Ozempic and Wegovy, you would think that that same lining of lose twice as much weight by fixing your diet and exercise, lose twice as much weight by fixing your diet and exercise. But this is where with GLP-1 medication, this is the shocking and fascinating part. I'm gonna go take you down a rabbit trail, but I promise I'm gonna loop back with the science and the data behind this because you need to know this. If you're on a GLP-1 medication or your bestie is, share this video with them because this talks about the newer drugs, Saxon says, and other doctors were telling this Atlantic article, Daniel Egbert, who wrote this article, is in the most clinical research of GLP-1s, patients get the medication in combination with a modest lifestyle intervention. So basically the folks doing these clinical trials, they're getting monthly 15-minute check-ins with a counselor and advice to cut back on calories. So basically with like a dietitian or nutritionist and a couple hours worth of exercise, like walking every week. In large trials of Wegovy, semaglutide, and it's Ozempic, but Ozempic's for type 2 diabetics, but same thing as Wegovy. It's called Step 1. This approach produced a weight loss among participants about 15% of their body weight. So that's called Step 1. That's where they're like having the mental, the physical, and the food component, right? Like the trainer, essentially, the trainer, the dietitian, and a counselor to help them with like their food eating stuff. They lost 15% of their body weight. That group's called Step 1. Step 3, in another trial of Wegovy, tried something more. Participants were offered bi-weekly check-ins with a registered dietitian. They spend the first 2 months on the drug, consuming a very low-calorie meal replacements. Evidence suggests that in the absence of Wegovy, all of this extra coaching would make major difference in people's health. Which for me, that's been the case. That's me. I am that. I have an Avengers team of people who have helped me get this far to lose the 100 pounds. But for people on Wegovy, the benefits were negligible. Those enrolled in the Step 3 trial lost on average of 16% of their body weight. just a hair more than people on step 1 loss. That speaks to the point that maybe there is the intensive lifestyle program. So one was more intensive than the other. This intensive lifestyle program may not necessarily with these new medications. It seems to play out also with the VA, the Veterans Affairs System also works. Patients on the older, less potent anti-obesity drugs were expected to participate. They had to participate on ongoing lifestyle modifications with monthly check-ins, Saxon told me. He said that him and his colleagues were prescribing more GLP-1s. He said they don't really mandate that anymore because they're seeing it even without those lifestyle modifications, maintaining their weight loss with these newer meds. The bottom line is that you don't necessarily need intensive lifestyle intervention for these drugs. Y'all, let me close my mouth. So this whole component of like the dietitian, the nutritionist, the trainer, the counseling for the mindset component, it doesn't really matter with the newer drugs with Wegovy, and I'm lumping in Zepbound into that because that's slightly higher data than even Wegovy. So essentially, obesity specialists, including Saxon, haven't given up on dieting and exercising, but the field has begun to reevaluate the nature of such guidance. We need to figure out what that's going to look like, said Sue Uvansky, who co-directs the Office of Obesity Research at National Institutes of Diabetes, Digestive and Kidney Diseases. So they're going through basically and reevaluating all these processes that we've had. And I don't know about you, but for me, I'm like, my world spent, I mean, to quote Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, the play, world turned upside down. That is for you, my fit cookie. My singing is just for you. So it's freeing up lifestyle intervention in more of a refined way. So this is where like the new phases are happening. We do have muscle mass loss. And so refinement of these lifestyle, it's not just a blanket of diets, like having a diet modification on there, but going through, there's a co-author on a paper, the Wake Forest University obesity doctor and epidemiologist Christina Lewis told Atlantic in this article that GLP-1 drugs don't make dieting and exercise irrelevant at all. In fact, they free patients up to focus on lifestyle intervention in more of a refined way. Tell me, say amen down below if you have had this or if you agree with this, of where it's more of a refining part of it. People can think about switching to a wholesome diet, being more active, and getting more sleep. All of these interventions will be beneficial regardless of your weight. This all sounds very reasonable, but a broader context, it feels more like a concession. For decades now, the most ardent critics of weight loss industry and of its associated doctors have been saying something similar. Healthy behaviors can and should be decoupled with single-minded goal of making people smaller. So, y'all, I'm like, this is blowing my mind, but I really am leaning into the part of more of a refined piece on that. So for me, it's how do I move more? I've talked about this, just walking in general, like finding these different pockets to get pretty good at. Like I've gotten pretty good at walking. I've gotten pretty good at making sure I'm having my water because that keeps me fuller longer. It goes through, and a couple of other instances, but the article says, for instance, clinical trials found people on GLP-1 drugs were losing lots of muscles and bones. This is what I was talking about. In fact, these and other fat-free tissues accounted for 25 to 40% of their total weight loss, losing that muscle. To mitigate any added risk of weakness or fractures that may result, some experts now suggest that people on these medications should eat more protein and engage in more resistance training that they might have in a traditional lifestyle intervention. And my friends, that is the point in which this whole, I went down a rabbit hole now for the last almost 9 minutes that I wanted to get around to, but I wanted to give the data first. We still do, and I'll use my I statements. I am passionate about talking about this. I realize my voice is very intense. I am super passionate about having more protein for my body and having resistant training for my body because of the muscle mass loss. And if you have not thought about this, you may want to put this in your checklist of things to think about as you're going through your GLP-1 weight loss journey. At the very beginning, when I first started this, I could not even think about talking about resistance training. I'm like, I went from eating 3 helpings of dinner at nighttime to having a salad plate or an appetizer plate size of my dinner. That just blew my mind. I went from binge eating almost every night in the pandemic. It was HE double hockey sticks on earth I would never wish that on my worst enemy. To then at nighttime being able to wind down, have some water, and go to bed without even thinking about binge eating. Being like, I'm full. This is what full feels like. I love feeling full with GLP-1 medication. And so I want to encourage you with these things. It may take waves, has been my experience, of learning how just to eat normally. Then with that, how do I eat more protein in that? And fixing this food component. Because for me, it's been 80% about the food, 20% about the working out. And then this other piece, and someone had asked me, what am I doing for resistance training? I have not been in quite some time though, just because of the holidays and my crazy schedule. I have got to make the commitment to go back. This article is motivating me too. And then I have the Pavolve. I bought it. It's kind of pricey, but there's free stuff here on YouTube, by the way. You don't have to spend an arm and a leg for resistance training. You can use cans of soup if you don't have weights. Although I do have on my Amazon list this week at the Amazon, in my holiday guide, I had put a couple of weights in there too. So resistance training, and that I'll link in the description link below, of the advice of muscle building diets and workouts could end up being standard care for people on Ozempic, and I'm going to add in there Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, which is what I go back to the original title of this video of losing twice as much weight with Zepbound weight loss, Ozempic weight loss, Mounjaro weight loss, is on this talking about the member research team for step 1 and step 2 of the trials. Acknowledge the evidence for this approach is not yet complete about having the muscle building diets, meaning more protein and resistance training, but they're finding that having these lifestyle interventions for people with obesity, that adding in not focusing as much on aerobic exercise and very strict diets, that people are still having success regardless of that. And in JAMA, the Journal of American Medicine Association, argues the link between physical frailty. It's F-R-A-I-L-T-Y. That's not fragility, that's frailty. They argue the links between physical frailty and GLP-1 drugs is not supported by the data, and observes that if more than half of the weight of someone on Ozempic sheds fat, then they'll sure end up with a higher muscle to fat ratio than they did before. Doctors still fully don't understand why people on GLP-1 lose so much weight to begin with. Ozempic may be working on its own to foster different ways of eating. And this is one of the things I want to chime in too, that I notice about my own eating and then other people's too. I'm going to do a whole other video on this, and I have previously, but I want to revisit it. People with Wegovy, semaglutide, Ozempic, versus Zepbound, Mounjaro, Tirzepatide, there is different types of appetite suppression within that. For me, on Zepbound, I am just hungry not to eat. My brother and sister friends on Wegovy tell me that they are more inclined to eat, but they eat less when they're eating. They're like, as they're eating, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm full. Stop. Whereas for me, and this is up for debate, and I don't have data to back this. You guys know I'm science-based. I am science-based, and I don't have data to back this up other than watching thousands and thousands and thousands and listening to thousands of people in my free encouragement group, which I'll also link down below. Make sure you answer all those questions or you won't be admitted into the group. But that the appetite suppression on those two are different. So just if you're making decisions on GLP-1 medication, there is differences within the appetite suppression, which I didn't even know about when I first started. And I find that whole thing fascinating. Again, I've done a video on it, look down on the playlist too, but I'm gonna do an updated one. So people on the drug may end up eating less across the board while sticking to whatever diet they had before. Like 1 Pop-Tart for dinner, let's say, instead of 5, which, hello, I did that. That was like when I've done mistake videos of where I'm like, I totally did that, that was me. And then I was like, this is bad. I'm eating substantially smaller, and you hear about these bariatric patients who have the same thing of substantially smaller, and they're getting no nutrients, and their teeth are falling out, or their hair's substantially falling out, or what, you know what I mean? Like all of these things. So it goes back over to this. The drugs still work to shift people's tastes, which I've done a whole Ozempic tongue, it's called Ozempic tongue, video down below, that all of a sudden you like more fruits and vegetables, said Wadden, and you like lean proteins, which has been totally my experience, strength, and hope too. I have said this all along. I'm like, who is this person? I really enjoy a good salad. I got one in the refrigerator now, and I'm like, I had last night, the count went out to go get some nibbles, and I'm like, ooh, please get, I was going to the grocery store that always has the 98 or 99% lean ground chicken or ground turkey. I'm like, oh, please get me some of that, because I'm gonna have some of that for lunch. I am too full right now to actually eat it, so I'm just gonna have my salad. But leaning into our taste, I'll use my tastes have dramatically changed as a result of GLP-1 medication. Like, who craves a salad? I'm like, this beautiful woman does. Like, I do. As a result of taking Zepbound, my taste buds have changed. And gosh, how fantastic is that as a result of my taste buds changing from GLP-1 medication? But there's still so much research. Let's go back to the data of this article that I'm mentioning. There's so much data of the mere fact of losing lots of weight could lead someone to engage in more physical activity, or their access to gym or time spent with a trainer. Wadden, like many other doctors, remains convinced that dieting and exercise should continue to be standard therapy for people who are overweight or who have moderate obesity. And for some people with more weight to lose, tens of millions of Americans with a BMI higher than 35, he believes the rules are changing. I don't think lifestyle modification is longer the cornerstone of obesity treatment. Friends, just bust my buttons. This was a fascinating article. I'm going to email Daniel Egberg because I'd love to actually interview him on him interviewing all these people, because that is fascinating to me. It's changing the game. To lose, how we're talking about how to lose twice as much weight with the older anti-obesity medications, the older GLP-1 medications, you would have to do all of this extensive lifestyle changes. But this is saying we're learning what that modification looks like. We're like still in the genesis of this, which blows my mind, of lifestyle modifications. So for me, what has worked really, really well, and that I'll continue to like pound my drum on, that has worked great, and when I'm in optimal weight loss, because I've lost 100 pounds, I'm still have technically with my, people ask me, and so to be clear, I still have 30 pounds left to lose technically for my BMI. I am a size 14, although right now I'm in a size large sweatpants, honey. Just throw my leg up there. I'm in a large sweatpants. She wears Gucci on the top. My sweatpants down on the bottom. It's a mullet attire, I tell you. Business on the top and party on the bottom. So I'm still technically a size 14 bottom. But my top size is medium large. I was large until like last week, and y'all are like, your tops are becoming really big. Like even this is like big. So I'm like, I ordered some medium tops. I'm like, oh my God, like this is so weird. Anybody having this is so weird, having been morbidly obese for decades and then being like, oh, I'm debating about wearing a size medium top. Like it's weird. This is a whole weird phenomenon. Anyways, I find it interesting, and what I go back to, so the takeaways of this video is we don't fully know in terms of our lifestyle changes, we do need to make them. And Eli Lilly tells us, the manufacturer, in our literature of Zepbound and Mounjaro, we got to make lifestyle changes, diet and exercise. But what those nuances are, we are still learning and figuring out. And so how cool, you guys know I always come back to gratitude. How cool is that we get to be a part of figuring this out? But the B of this is what I go back to is obesity is a spectrum. There's varying degrees of obesity. In my free encouragement group, I have some people who've weighed 500 pounds, 400 pounds, 300 pounds, 200 pounds. Like there's different varying degrees, and people who are like, I don't know, 20 or 30 pounds overweight. There's varying degrees of this for people on GLP-1 medications. So therefore, there should be varying degrees of treatment associated with the disease of obesity. And I need to start talking about how obesity is a disease more. I've not done a very good job on that. Please forgive me. But we do need to be having that as part of our education of, for me, this formerly morbidly obese person who's now just overweight, that there is a treatment that's required with this in addition to GLP-1 medication, but that may vary too. And so in my free encouragement group, when we talk about things like high protein snacks and like my free meal plan that I have on countessofshopping.com and like all of these resources, it may be varying degrees of spectrum for you. For me, from somebody who is only 130 pounds overweight versus another brother or sister who's 250 pounds overweight, that is a varying degree of what the treatment plan is going to look like and the lifestyle modifications. And within that scope, for me, because there was, I don't want to say trauma, but like bad juju associated with diet culture, since I've been on a diet since I was like 10 years old, and exercise and things like that, there was more healing that had to take place, I think, to catch up where some other people who may have a better relationship with food perhaps would be. All of that to say, I still think, for me, sticking with my high protein focused diet, fruits, vegetables to get the fiber in, resistance training, walking, and doing what we feel for our own bodies is going to be slightly different for every person. And so I always like to throw out, this is my experience, strength, and hope, never medical advice. Always talk to your own healthcare provider. But within that, throw out some tips for you. Take what you want and leave the rest. Because some of this is just for me and it's not going to be helpful for some people. But for some people, they're like, oh my gosh, I did what blah, 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 and it was major. Like how I talk about, and now everybody's copied that video about my injection site rotation, of how much it mattered for me. If you're new, go watch that video. And so for some people that's majorly applicable and others it's not. So like I said, take what you want and leave the rest. I find this fascinating. This whole topic is fascinating. And so to go back to lose twice as much weight on Zepbound weight loss, we're still figuring that out. But within that, it's still somewhat agreed within here of focusing on the muscle mass loss problem and combating that with protein, combating that with resistance training, and moving our bodies. And naturally, it's a math equation is what I've said before of, it is kind of calories in, calories out, but not really. But it is, I have to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. And how helpful that is, that that's a math equation and not emotional. And it's not a moral failing, it's a math equation. Because before it sure felt like a moral failing or that I was a loser, and I'm not a loser. I'm a loser on the scales, but it literally is not me being a loser. It's literally a math equation. And so I hope that helps. I also hope that helps too of trying some different things. For me, when I keep hitting that weight loss as I've gone the last almost 2 years, and I've documented the process so you can see my weight loss stalls as I go through, trying different things, right? I used to be so against protein shakes and stuff like that. I'd be like, I want to eat real food. And I do eat real food. But here's what, I couldn't hit my protein goals without having things like Bioptimizer's Protein Breakthrough. Use the discount code QUEEN. Like I've needed to have these other things. Muscle recovery is substantially different with my workouts with element electrolytes versus not. With side effects the next 24 to 48 hours versus not. True. True, 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 but that's for me. You got to do you, boo. You do you, I'll do me. Collectively, let's encourage each other because it's going to be slightly different for each person. Wilma Jean says hello. Our new dog, she was just in a parade yesterday. It was her first parade. And you guys know the Little Inn at Washington, the bougie, it's like $600 a plate. One day I'll eventually go there, but today's not the day. Their town of Washington in Virginia had a parade and Wilma walked in it. It was so fun. I love you guys so super much. I'm going to link that down below. Our accountability question, what are you doing today to move you closer to your goals? Tell me in the comments. 2, your emoji of the day is going to be an apple because a countess a day keeps the doctor at bay. Just kidding. Just kidding. I really want a good apple. I'm like craving an apple right now. Going back to that thing of what are you craving? I'm craving a really good juicy honey crisp apple and I can't seem to find one. So if you have any recommendations of stores that have good honey crisps right now, tell me. I look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow. And again, I wasn't supposed to do this video. Go watch the holiday guide. That was supposed to be today's video of the day. But I wanted to do this one instead. Love you guys. See you tomorrow.